All right, let's begin with the homework, right? Since we are talking about homework, so we have homework 8 out. So homework 8 would be about these Connect 4 game. This is just the idea of a game that you want to connect dots or balls, whatever you want to call it. So we have 2 players, and each player would be putting balls with a given color. So the color is representing the player, right? So red means player 1, black player 2, or the other way. Actually, I'm not sure. And obviously, you want to connect 4 of those balls in a contiguous A. If you do that, then you are the winner. Right? You do that with 4 dots or 4 balls, you win the game. Did you saw this game before? Yeah. Okay, so the way you would be adding the balls, right, is or the dots is on a column wise manner. So you can only you cannot choose any location. So the let's say you go with the first column, you would necessarily be putting the ball or the dot on the bottommost position here, and then the next one would be put on top of that, and then so on. So essentially, like you are, I think it's easy if you interpret that as actual balls, and you have these pipes or tubes where you put the balls in, and there's only one way really to put the balls, right? No, it's not like you can choose the precise location where the ball would be. What you can choose is the column, right? But other than that, you're not really choosing the precise location. But that depends on the current state of the game. In this homework, I am using this pattern called MVC that you probably heard about. So model view controller is a fairly popular pattern that you would see, especially on database and web development. There's a lot of usage on that. So I guess that's not new for most of you. Am I right? Kind of. So the idea of the model view controller is that you want to separate the logic. You want to have these 3 components, and these 3 components would interact with each other, but they are independent. So you can actually even replace or have multiple of the same kind of component. For instance, you can have a view that is based on a text terminal, a text interface, and you can have a view that is a web interface, or you can have a view that is a graphical user interface. So the view part is essentially the part where you would be presenting the interface to the user. And you have the model that is the underlying logic of the program. And you have the controller that would interact with the model. So it would update the model, it would pass information to the model, also receive data from the model. And obviously the view would be updated based on that. So there's this sort of cyclical relationship among those 3 components. We will be using JavaFX. So I will actually spend some time today trying to show the process that I have shared with you already. I have shared a document, right? A link at the very beginning of the course. But I didn't really show like actually the step-by-step process, so we can go over it and possibly troubleshoot something if something goes wrong. So this is the kind of structure that you would see in the program. I am providing a lot of starter code in this case. So I am providing the implementation of the model and also the controller and the view specifically for the command line interface. So you actually have a fully working implementation already. What you don't have is the graphical view. So the graphical user interface you don't have implemented. And that's what I want you to implement. The JavaFX part, essentially, right? This is just the idea that I have mentioned already, right? So the three components and how they would interact. There's also this observer pattern that I would comment in a bit, but this is just the idea of a subscription model. So the way that we would implement, one possible way that we can implement, and that's used in this context of MVC in our program, is that I can think of the view or the viewer as a component that would be observing my model. So I have these messages or these data that is being shared among these components set up via an interface. So my interface would provide the means for me to subscribe from my viewer, from my view, to my model, and my model would be able, obviously, to keep track of all the viewers that it has. And then every time that you need to update something on the view, what would trigger that update would be the model itself. The model, because it has a reference to all the viewers that have subscribed, so it can just invoke that process, right? So we can use that via regular Java interfaces. And that's a kind of pattern that is generally called the observer pattern. So let me go ahead and there are some questions that I have in the files as well. So you can go over that and write that and respond to those. And that would be mainly related to the MVC architecture. And there's the implementation itself. It would be, as I said, essentially just implementing the graphical user interface. Let's go ahead and see the program running. So there's one thing that I want to comment. I have provided here this module info file already. That's in the provided files that I'm giving you. If you want to just run the implementation as is without having the GUI part, you would need to comment at least that line, or just remove that module, or move to some other place and then bring it back when you need. That's because this is not implemented yet, right? And that's what you can actually see that here. You don't have any classes here. So if you try to do that, you just get an error. I'm telling you ahead of time, you can just do that. I guess that's the easiest way that you can have the program in a runnable fashion. So let's go to the plain text user interface. Let me see if I can run from here. I think I'm gonna need to open. Actually, let me open just that folder. It's easier. All right, so let's run this class here. Again, this is the class that I would have my viewer implemented. Actually, my viewer and my controller as well. This is the model that I am providing. And if everything works as expected, you don't really need to do any change to the model. So because you have these three independent components, right? So you would be implementing the viewer or the view component. So you don't need to touch the model at all. Okay. And here's just the interface that I was talking about. So here specifically, I have added the declaration of that interface. I'm calling that observer. I am specifying a generics type to it. And the only method that I expect to see implemented is this update method. Okay, fairly simple interface. Let me run this one. So I want to show you how the command line thing would look like. Okay, so here, that's actually an interesting error that I am getting. So I am getting an error for the JavaFX controls. This is most likely related to the fact that I did not set up this project yet to have the JavaFX library, right? Let's see. You don't see any JavaFX here in my libraries. So I need to add that. And one way that I can do that is no, I think you need to do something a little bit more elaborate. Yeah, there's no context. So the way that I would typically there are many different, not that many, but there are different ways in which you can make a JavaFX program work or set up in your environment. But the way that I prefer is trying to set up things on IntelliJ as close as possible to the way that IntelliJ expects it to be, right? So the way that IntelliJ would treat the JavaFX piece would be as an external library that is part of your project. So obviously you need to download that beforehand. If you still did not do that, you want to do that by using the link that I provide in the syllabus. So if you observe here, you see that we have the link to JavaFX. So you can use that link to download JavaFX. After you download, you can just unzip in any place that you want, in any path. The place that I usually use is someplace in my home directory, just to make it easier. But you do need to remember where you uncompress that, because you will need to reference that from IntelliJ, right? So in my case here, let me see where I put that. I don't even remember where I left it here. Okay, easy. So in my home directory, I have my JavaFX. Sorry, I have my JavaFX directory uncompressed, right? And as I said, I would need to reference that. There's also a link here in the syllabus that would take you to this link here, to the step-by-step installation of JavaFX, or not installation of JavaFX itself, but how to set up a project to support JavaFX on IntelliJ. Okay. And that, if I click that here, you would see this thing here. You can install a slightly newer one. I would advise against installing beta. You can stick to an LTS version. That's good enough. So for instance, if you actually try to use the version 17, that would work fine for us. Let me go back to IntelliJ. So I need to go to my project structure. And somewhere here, I would have the ability to add libraries to my project. Okay, so I would need to come here, new Java library. So I need to point to where my files of JavaFX would be. Here. I believe you need to use the lib as the location, if I'm not incorrect. Okay. So now you should see here that JavaFX now is listed as one of the libraries that you have in your project. Okay. If that worked, it should also show here in this external library piece of the UI, right? That's one indication. In this case, I have here as lib. Another thing that you want to do is, but that's specific to a run configuration of some file that would be using the JavaFX. That would be to actually specify. Let me show this here. I need to come here, modify, and where is it? Here. So you wanna add this option to add the provided scope to the dependencies in the class path. So you want to have that option set. That would allow JavaFX to be used. There's a way to actually set that as a default in your whole project, but that's good enough. If you do a per run configuration, or if you do it for the whole project, it's the same thing, as long as you have that set, right? Okay, so let's now see if I am able to actually run this code, because this is just setting the requirements, right? Okay, that's what I would expect. I am still not using directly any JavaFX, right? Because this interface that I have here is the plain text interface. So this is my view and the controller implementation. This is the representation of the board that I have. So these are the places where I could be putting the balls, right? So you would just be choosing the column, and this would mean that if you are player one, you would be putting a player one ball in that specific column. If you are player two, you would be putting the other kind of ball, right? So each player has a different kind of ball. Let me actually show you that. Let's say I am player one and I want to put on column 0. So you would see that the player one ball has been added. Okay, so let's say player 2 wants to add to column 1. So you would see player 2 player 2 ball being added to column 1, which is the second column. So you would do that. That's a turn-based game, right? So you would be doing that between alternating between player 1 and 2 until you reach a case where you have 4 balls of the same type. So that would mean that that given player is the winning player. So if I actually try to show you that, I can put player 1 0 one more time, player 2 1. So I'll just repeat that so I can reach the point or the state where I have these vertically 3 balls of the same type. So because player 1 began, so player 1 could add a ball here, and that would be the winning move, right? So I can just do that, and you would see that the state of the game would move to player 1 winning the game. Okay. Clear? The dynamics of the game are clear? The last line, what?
P1 has won the game, so the last line enter column is of no use.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's just an artifact of the way the loop was implemented, but you're right. Yeah, the last time a player has a winning move, you don't have to print that. Yeah, we can check that. Check the state. If the state is player 1 win or player 2 win, then you don't have to print. Yeah.
You don't need to select two.
You always add into the top. You can think of it as tubes, individual tubes. So the ball would fall all the way down until it can go no more. Like if you would add here, you would necessarily be adding to this column. You would be adding to this location, the bottommost available location. Right? Always like that. So the only input necessary is really the column. Okay. Good. All right. So let's take a look at the code. I'm not going to actually go over the whole model. So that's part of the homework here for you to go over the model and understand the implementation. But I do want to show you the view, right? So very briefly, just to show you the methods and the overall structure that you would have in the model. So this is what it would look like. You see that I have a number of methods implemented already. So again, you don't need to implement that, right? The model is implemented for you. So what you need to implement is the viewer component in a way that would use a graphical interface, a graphical user interface. Okay. So let's see the viewer, and the viewer is way simpler actually. As you would see here, the majority of the logic of the code actually is implemented in the model, and that's the intention, right? That's the purpose that I want to follow with that MVC architecture or pattern. So my class here is implementing the observer interface, right? So the model would be implemented by that class, right? The type parameter that I am specifying here, just the type of the model that I am subscribing against, right? So that's what we saw here. Okay. So not this one. So I have a reference to my model. In my constructor, I am initializing that model. Then I am calling initialize view. Initialize view would call the add observer method against my model. So this is me, viewer, subscribing to that model. All right. You will need to follow a similar pattern, right, in your GUI implementation. And then I have an update method. That update method is actually the one that is the abstract method that I have in the interface. Okay. So why do I need that method? Because my model can change its state, and it needs to have some way to signal the viewer that it needs to be updated, right? To refresh, to update the contents of the current state. So for instance, if you add a new ball and you have a graphical user interface and the model actually, the model is updated. So you want that new ball to be presented in the viewer, in the graphical user interface. Okay. Yes, in this case, I'm just printing the output of this board. Even this is implemented in the model, right? So in this case, we opted to do that way, but you actually didn't have to do that in your graphical user interface. If you want to do that as an extra way to debug your program, you can do that. So at least you see in the terminal, not only in the window, the graphical window, but also in the terminal, you see the associated state. So you can compare against one against the other, right? Because they need to match. Okay. You print a couple of things here as we saw, right? And then there's the controller part, which would be essentially just taking the commands from a scanner object. So I would be using a scanner that I initialized, would be taking the inputs from the keyboard, and I'll be checking if the status is not over. This means that I can keep going, right? If I get -1, I leave the program. If not, I'll check if the move is a valid one, right? Why do I need to check that? What is an example of an invalid move? Going beyond the number of rows that I have in any column, right? So I cannot, that's not a valid move, right? So you can, in this case, it's checking only that, but another thing that you can think more generally by the scanner was to see if you have actually put a numerical input, right? Because in this case, I'm always getting a numerical input, an integer. But it might happen that the user might accidentally or on purpose type like a letter, and because I am using max int, that can actually throw an exception, right? So you might want to treat that. In this case, I didn't, but just so you know. So you call make a move, or you call the error saying that it's an invalid column, right? So essentially, your viewer is pretty much implemented. I only have my main left, and this is just initializing my own class, my viewer class, and then calling run, which is that piece of the controller. So in this case, I have the controller and the viewer in the same class. If you want, you can actually separate as well, right? But in this case, in that specific implementation, I have the model separated, and I have the controller and the viewer in one single class. Okay. Everything clear? So are we good on what needs to be done? Yeah. All right. So let's now move to the finishing the setup of the JavaFX, right? So I want to actually let me leave this one and open something that I can actually run. Okay, let me use the solution as the code that I want to make it run. So I could use any JavaFX implementation, right? But because I have previously set the repository in my machine to have JavaFX, so I want to try to get as untouched as possible of a project to go over the steps. So we would do essentially the same thing. So we would go on project structure. We would add, I should choose a valid version of Java. I don't think we need to do that, but just in case I want to set a slightly older language level. That's usually good if you are combining a specific version of Java with the JavaFX, so you don't run into the case of a mismatch of versions. You just step back a few versions. That usually does the trick in terms of making everything compatible. So I come here to libraries. I do the same process that I did before. I want to add JavaFX as an external library. I have already that here. Okay. So let's see if I'm able to run again the plain text user interface. Okay, so I am able to, so that's looking good. I also want to check if in my external libraries list here, I have, you guys want to remind me when I am actually cropping the screen to make sure that everybody's seeing what I am seeing as well. So here I have the JavaFX libraries, right? So that's something I did not have before, and I have after adding the external libraries. Finally, I want to actually try to run my solution, and I should get, actually, I was not expecting to have that. I would expect to have to come here and add that option that I mentioned. This one. So on most cases, you would need to add that option before you are able to actually run JavaFX code. Okay. So if you run into issues, you know that that's one of the things that you want to check. Again, this is not the only way that you can run JavaFX code, obviously, right? So you can even do from the command line, but you would need to specify the external libraries that you are using. Okay. So that's the most IntelliJ way of essentially running that. I know IntelliJ is the IDE that we are using here, at least most people, right? So that's one way in which I can do that. Okay, so if I come here and I click, I would be signaling that player one had chosen this column, right? So if I come here and click here, I would be signaling that player two have chosen this position. And I keep doing essentially the same thing that I did before until I reach the case where one of the players, in this case, player one, wins, right? So whoever gets the four balls first in an adjacent way, right? Either as a vertical line or a horizontal line or even a diagonal, that should be accepted. Okay.